bet that you have heard before the term progressive. Today, we're going to be talking about how to make progressive WordPress sites. And you have heard the term progressive probably in the context of progressive web apps, which means basically web apps that have been developed using modern web capabilities, or in the context of progressive enhancements, which is the application of those modern capabilities, web capabilities, into your sites in a step-by-step way, instead of like all at once. Here, we are using the term progressive to capture the notion of progressive web development, which means development of user-first web experiences using modern web capabilities, coding, and performance best practices. And the key here is the word user-first, which means that at the core of progressive web development is user experience. So let's start at the core. What is user experience? User experience refers to a person's emotion when they are using a product. In our case, that product is our website, our WordPress site. So it's all about how users feel when they are engaging with the content that we create and that we publish. So the way that I like to imagine this is, in a nutshell, what I want is my users to have that expression in their faces every time that they go to my site, a little bit. But what are the qualities in web experiences that actually bring joy to users? And there are mainly 4 main factors that are commonly present in what we define as delightful UX experiences. Users love applications that are fast and reliable. They load quickly, consistently, and they behave well once they are running. Users love applications that are secure. They want to feel safe when they are trusting their data and their transactions to the apps. Users love applications that feel integrated with their devices, that they can take advantage of all the features that the device has to offer. And users love applications that are engaging, right? They like that kick of wanting to go back to the application, and the application makes it very easy to come back to them. But for a long time, building applications in the web that satisfies these 4 pillars of delightful UX was not easy or not possible at all. And the main reason was that for a long time, the main power of the web was the URL, the hyperlinking capabilities. But if you compare it to platforms to develop native apps, for example, in the Android platform, the web lagged behind in terms of the things that you could do with it. However, the good news is that the web has been evolving quickly in recent years, and nowadays it's fully possible to build awesome web experiences only using web capabilities. This here is a subset of the web APIs that are available in the web platform today. So you can do a lot of things with them. For example, accessing device features like the vibration signals, the gyroscope. You can implement native-like features like add to home screen, offline access, and so on. Even augmented reality is a thing today in the web. Now, and on top of this, we have modern development workflows, a lot of tooling, and powerful JavaScript frameworks that add additional layers of abstraction that allows us to build very, very complex and awesome experiences. And on top of all this, you have yourself, the web developer, eager to harness the power of this mountain of capabilities, right? The challenge is that the complexity is such that truly taking advantage of what the web has to offer is very difficult, right? So as the complexity of the web ecosystem has increased, we also have seen an increase in what I like to call the capabilities usage gap, which simply is the difference between what can be done and what is actually done. For example, if we go back to, let's say, 1999, probably most of you were not developing the web at the time, but arguably the gap was not big at that time. There were not many things that we could do in the web. There was HTML, CSS, and the best thing is there was only a single form factor that you had to develop. Now, fast forward to today, the complexity has grown so much. There are so many tools, so many frameworks, and so many things, and we have to develop applications that have to run well in what it seems to me an infinite number of form factors. So no wonder that that gap has grown. And the problem with this gap is that if we don't take advantage of what the web has to offer, it's very difficult to build applications that satisfy the pillars of a delightful UX. And we see evidence of this a lot in the wild. There are studies that show the prevalence of applications that run very slow. They exhibit very poor load time performance. For example, 19 seconds load time on 3G on mobile. 75% of mobile sites takes 10 seconds or more to load. And also, there are a lot of applications, too many, that exhibit poor runtime performance. So things like unresponsive pages or content shifting in front of your eyes when you're engaging with it. And the bad news is that users hate this. And we see evidence of that in the wild as well, in the impact that these experiences has on the revenue potential of our site. For example, more than half the users are going to leave a site that takes more than 3 seconds to load. 75% takes more than 10 seconds, then you figure it out, right? There is an inverse correlation between load time and conversions. And there is an inverse correlation between revenue and load time. So, but for me, the worst collateral effect of not being able to take advantage of the web is what is known in sociology as the Matthew effect of accumulated advantage. Probably you have heard of it as the rich gets richer principle, which means in our context that given the complexity of the web platform, it seems that only superstar developers or organizations that have the capability to afford large, high-quality engineering teams are the only ones that have a true chance to take advantage of the web. And that is not what the web is all about. Okay? And notice that given the prevalence of the experiences that I just described, even superstar developers have a hard time to do it. Okay? So the bottom line is we must strive to close the capabilities usage gap. And there are mainly 2 ways that we can go about it. One is on us. Given that the web capabilities are there for us to use them, if we all do the right thing, things will be OK. Right? We should not see those experiences. However, that is easier said than done. The reality looks more like this. Right? You have to master so many things to have applications that are delightful that it's very challenging. You have to be careful, do not interfere with the critical rendering path. Load resources asynchronously. Do code splitting, etc. Master browser caching. So many things. So the landscape is so complex that it's very difficult to do the right thing the first time. Imagine doing the right thing all the time for the lifetime of your application in all circumstances all the time. So it's very hard. A better option is what I like to think about a progressive web ecosystem. It's a platform, a web ecosystem, when doing the right thing is easy, right? And it involves several factors. The first one is an evolving web platform, right? A platform where new web APIs are added, probably existing APIs are improved. We have good sets of tools that help developers automate complex tasks. We have frameworks that add layers of abstraction to do complex applications. And a key point in a progressive web ecosystem is that we take the learnings that we get from using the tooling and the frameworks, and we see what works, and we bake them back into the web platform. So this is a better option, right? We want to pursue this. How should we focus our efforts to achieve this? In order to answer that question, it's very useful for me to think about the web in terms of a very, very simple model that has 3 layers. The top layer has the content ecosystem that we all use every day and give us the perception of the web as one thing, right? Then there is a second layer conformed by content management systems that are basically software platforms that make it easy to create and maintain content. Okay? And on top of that, the bottom layer is what you hear many times as the web platform. Okay? That is nothing else that the implementation or the power of the web exposed by browsers in implementation of the web APIs. So you can see that the content ecosystem, there is a dotted line divided in 2. And that's very important because nowadays, about 50% of sites in the web are powered by some sort of content management system. Okay? And the other ones by some configuration, combination of tools and frameworks and so on. Now, at Google, we are interested in closing the capabilities usage gap everywhere, and we are pursuing significant efforts across all dimensions of the web ecosystem. Our effort, particularly in this talk, focuses on closing the capabilities usage gap in the area of content management systems. Now, I want to make clear, all content management systems are very important, and we want to help to make them all progressive platforms. But in this work, we are focusing specifically in WordPress. And there are several reasons why focusing on WordPress will cause an impact not only for the WordPress platform, but also for the content management system space in general and the web as a whole. Okay, first, historically, WordPress has been seen as a blogging platform, right? But the platform has been evolving steadily since it started back in 2003, if I am not mistaken. And now it powers experiences across a variety of areas. You name it, travel, education, shopping, etc. Okay, so if we close the capabilities usage gap in WordPress, we are going to be improving the experience for users across a variety of verticals. That's very important. The second one, WordPress is certainly the largest player in the content management system, enjoying right now like a 59% of the open source CMS market share. And the third reason, which is for me staggering, nowadays WordPress powers around 30% of the web. So in a nutshell, when I think about WordPress, I think about so many users publishing and consuming content in the platform, and I would like all of them to be able to get a delightful user experience, both creating the content and consuming it. So going back to our definition of progressive web development, when I say progressive WordPress, what I mean is a WordPress platform where modern workflows, coding and performance best practices, and the use of modern web APIs is the standard and not the exception. It's commonplace. Okay? Now, you must be asking yourself, how in the world, given the size and scope of WordPress, how can we make progress quickly? We want to have a progressive WordPress size yesterday, not 5 years from now. But fear not. I am sure that you have heard about the Accelerated Mobile Pages Project, or AMP for short. AMP is an open source library that makes it easy to build web pages and sites in general that can provide those kind of experiences that are very compelling and load near instantaneously, right? In a nutshell, what AMP does, it is to provide out of the box a set of powerful capabilities and performance optimization that address three things: load time performance. I want snappy load times. Runtime performance. I don't want content system in front of my eyes on responsive pages. And usability. So I want a smooth transition between my interactions when I engage with content. So if we could integrate AMP with the WordPress platform as a choice, right, we would be putting at the fingertips of all WordPress developers the capability of taking advantage of what AMP has to offer to create experiences that are compelling and are very easy. So let's quickly see what AMP is in a nutshell, and then we want to see the integration in action. So, oh, sorry. I need to click faster. But so developing AMP pages, entails three components. The first thing is AMP HTML, that you could think of it as both a subset of HTML, because there are some HTML tags that are not allowed. And the reason is that in order to satisfy reliable performance, you have to impose certain constraints. Right? But it's also a superset of HTML, because AMP is essentially a web components library that provides a lot of advanced functionality that you can have at your fingertips in the form of custom element tasks. Okay? The second component is the AMP runtime system. That is a piece of JavaScript that runs on every AMP page and has logic to control custom elements, a lot of performance optimization, the load scheduling, and so on. And then we have the AMP cache. Notice that the AMP cache is not necessary to develop AMP pages, but it is a sort of like content distribution network that serves to make valid AMP pages available and ready to use to everyone. I said that it's not necessary, but it does offer a lot of optimizations and performance interactions with the runtime system of AMP that actually provide that load time, snappy load time that users love. And finally is the use of AMP in the web ecosystem that encompasses the implementation of product features, and that's important, product features across a variety of platforms that are seeking the same that we are seeking: enhancing the experience that the users of those platforms get. Things like, for example, the top news carousel at Google is one of those product features. Twitter uses it, LinkedIn, and now WordPress is among these platforms that can benefit of what AMP has to offer. So in WordPress, everything happens in one or three places, right? WordPress Core, that is the platform itself. Themes that have to do with the look and feel of the WordPress sites. And plugins that have to do with extending the functionality that the platform has to offer. So when we say AMP in WordPress, we are referring to an AMP plugin that is integrated with the WordPress platform and the interaction of that plugin with other components of WordPress sites, like, for example, the underlying theme, other plugins that may be installed. So that is what we refer to as AMP in WordPress. Now, the plugin for WordPress was pioneered by an open source project started by Automatic. And it was started at the very, very early ages of AMP. They were one of the earliest adopters of the framework. And they implemented a very simple but effective mechanism that we call the pair mode, which means that for every piece of content in a post, there was an equivalent version, but for AMP. Okay? So you have for every piece of content, you have two versions. And the plugin succeeded in achieving this goal, but had one main limitation, that it was that if you didn't have enough engineering capabilities to work on the results, you usually got a lot of functional and visual disparity between the original content and the AMP version. So after the version plugin 0.5 of the plugin, we joined forces with XWP. And basically, we set our eyes in our site on enabling what we call native experiences in WordPress. So a world where there is no need to have two versions of the same content, because there is no visual disparity or functional disparity. You can have only the AMP version and get all the benefits that AMP has to offer without sacrificing the flexibility of the WordPress platform. That was our goal. Now, there was a lot of work put into this version, and it indeed enabled native app experiences. We presented that work in AmpConf a couple of months ago, and it's very good. However, it's still oriented to power users. It is not as easy as we would like to be in order to make it mainstream. So we are here at I/O, and we are going to show you soon a lot of improvement that we did in the area of tooling and also in the editorial workflow of content creation in WordPress. In a second, we are going to talk about that. And after this, after 1.0 of the plugin, I said that we have right now on the alpha version of the 1.0, then comes a lot of work that we want to mention a little bit at the end that has to do with content ecosystem adoption. But before we do that, I would like to call Thierry Mueller from XWP to show us where we are along the road to progressive WordPress.
Good morning. The latest work on the AMP plugin is focused on closing the capability usage gap in two ways. The first one is by providing a framework to empower developers to integrate AMP in the WordPress ecosystem. And the second one is by providing tools which seamlessly integrate AMP components in the brand new content creation workflow in WordPress. To put this in context and better understand how we're closing the capability usage gap, we're going to look at some real-world example. Let's take the 2015 theme, which comes by default bundled in WordPress. It is active on 500,000 websites today. But what would it really take to actually convert this theme to be AMP compatible, and specifically provide a native AMP experience? Well, let's look at the theme first and some of the challenges we may encounter. The 2015 theme is all about content. It is designed for clarity. It is also designed with a mobile-first approach. One thing we want to pay specific attention to is the menu dropdown, which uses JavaScript, custom JavaScript. On the code side, if we look closer at the archives widget, it uses disallowed inline JavaScript, or disallowed in AMP at least. If we look closer at the image, it uses an image tag and not an AMP image tag. on the CSS side, it loads 3 CSS style sheets. And if we look closer at the total size, it's close to 114 kilobytes, which is way above the 50 kilobytes allowed in AMP. If we look at the JavaScript, there is multiple JavaScript files loading, and if we take a closer look at the function.js, it includes or contains the handlers for the navigation and widget area we saw earlier on mobile. So to convert this theme, we have some challenges: custom JavaScript, too much CSS for AMP, and a lot of non-AMP HTML. So let's look at how we can convert this theme. The AMP plugin comes with a set of amazing features that can really help us overcome these challenges. And it will actually do most of the heavy lifting for us. So the first thing we would need to do is to declare the so-called AMP theme support. It is extremely simple. All it takes is to add the code snippet that you see on the screen right now in the custom plugin or in the child theme. And once the AMP theme support is declared, the AMP plugin will consider the active theme, for instance, the 2015 theme, as a native AMP citizen and apply a set of really nifty features. For example, the AMP plugin is capable of converting all the WordPress built-in components and make them AMP compatible. And by that, we mean widgets, embeds, comments, literally everything rendered by the WordPress components. So we saw early on the problem with the archives widget. And if we look at the code on top before the AMP plugin conversion, we have this inline disallowed JavaScript in AMP. And if we look after the AMP conversion, we can see that the plugin has changed that to use the AMP navigation to a function, which is part of the runtime JavaScript library. And that will help, or actually that will pass AMP validation. So if we look at the invalid AMP and the valid AMP, what we are after is to get exactly the same result. And that's what we see on the screen. We didn't lose any functionalities, but on the right-hand side, we can see that it passes AMP validation. Only 50 kilobytes of CSS is allowed in AMP to ensure maximum page speed. But the reality is, in WordPress, a lot of the themes contain a lot more than that. And to address this issue and make it easier, the AMP plugin includes a CSS Tree Shaking mechanism, which has the ability to only load the CSS needed on any given page and remove all the unnecessary CSS. So if we look once again at the stripped down version of the 2015 theme code, there are 2 style sheets, disallowed style sheets, and the style.css alone is 96 kilobytes. The plugin has the ability to concatenate the CSS, apply the tree shaking, and print it inline using the AMP custom style HTML as prescribed by AMP. And that will pass validation. If we look once again at the invalid and valid AMP, we can see that we achieve what we are after, which is exactly the same result. But we've gone from 114 kilobytes of CSS down to 9 kilobytes. It is 10 times smaller. Predicting what thousands of plugins and custom integrations will render on the page is extremely difficult. And to address that, the plugin includes a post-processor, which is capable of validating the page output and ensuring AMP compatibility wherever possible. But in some cases, it may come or cost some functionalities, especially when JavaScript is involved. So let's look at this a little bit in more details. Once again, if we look at the HTML before the AMP plugin conversion, we see that there's an image. And if we look at the bottom snippet, the AMP plugin is able to convert this image using the AMP image tag. And that is considered as a safe change. But if we look at the JavaScript, the functions.js, in order to pass AMP validation, it would have to be removed. And the plugin is capable of doing that. But if we look at the invalid AMP and AMP version, the invalid works, the menu toggle, because it contains the JavaScript. But on the right-hand side, the menu doesn't work anymore. And there we have a problem, right? The goal of the plugin is to make AMP integration as easy as possible and to improve the user experience, but not damage it by any means. And that's why we saw the need for a validation workflow, which allows developers to benefit from all the features that the plugin includes, but also have control and be able to manage it. So by default, the plugin will convert and apply all the conversions which are considered as safe, for example, the AMP HTML conversion. And for the changes which could potentially introduce regression, they would have to go through a validation workflow, which looks like this. For example, for the CSS Tree Shaking, which is still in beta, the developer can go ahead and view the front end as if the plugin was to apply this feature. And as we can see, and we saw earlier on, it works perfectly fine. And at that point, we can go ahead and tell the plugin, please enable it so that it passes AMP validation. In the context of function.js, we saw earlier on that it actually breaks the menu. And the plugin will not apply this change by default, not to introduce regression. And that will give developers a chance to go ahead and fix it. For example, using the mBind component and use the setState function to toggle the class, right? And then preview the page again once this change has been applied in a child theme, for example, by overwriting the header.php. And once it's proven to be working, the developer can go ahead and tell the plugin, now that we fixed it, you can go ahead and remove the functions.js. And that will then pass the AMP validation. So to recap what it took to actually convert the 2015 theme, which is a popular theme, right? We had to declare or enable the AMP theme support. We had to apply one fix for the menu toggle by using the mBind component. And we went through a validation workflow and told the plugin to apply all the AMP conversion after reviewing them. And this is the end result. What we're looking at right now is a native AMP version of the 2015 theme. It looks as great as the non-AMP version. Of course, if we look at it on mobile, it looks similar as well. And as we can see just now, because we applied the mBind, the menu is still working. Is it passing AMP validation? If we look at the console, we can see that it passed AMP validation successfully. And let's look on the performance side. Let's run the Lighthouse audit without the AMP plugin. So that's before the AMP conversion. We get a score of 66 with a 4.8 first meaningful prints. If we run the same Lighthouse test, which is running on 3G slow mobile, after the AMP conversion, we get an 88 with a first meaningful paint of 2.8 seconds. Amazing. We really see how the latest development work done on the plugin is helping converting existing products, existing themes and plugins used by millions of people to be AMP compatible. The other main focus area is on the content creation side. Gutenberg is the new revolutionary content creation experience in WordPress. It replaces half a dozen inconsistent ways of customizing WordPress, bringing it in line with the modern code standards and aligning with web initiatives. It also closes the gap between the backend and the front end, offering an amazing visual building experience. So Gutenberg has the concept of blocks to build pages. And on the other side, AMP has the concept of components, micro-libraries to build pages. But what about combining the power of both and build Gutenberg AMP blocks? And this is exactly what we did. And it opens the door for amazing things to happen. We worked hard on pushing the boundaries to take the native AMP experience in WordPress a step further, leveraging all the latest work done on the plugin, as well as a range of custom Gutenberg AMP blocks. And this is what it looks like. What we're looking at right now is a WordPress and Gutenberg-powered theme. It's inspired from the M-Start travel, and all functionalities that we see on the page is powered by WordPress and Gutenberg. If we look at a single adventure, we can see that we're also leveraging some of the M components. For example, the M carousel to slide through the images, or the M bind to actually toggle the price. We are also using some of the WordPress components, such as the comments, to actually allow users to submit reviews, or the WordPress search to actually search for adventures. And we can really see how the content management system shines to manage the adventures here. On mobile, it is the same version of the theme, and it looks just as great out of the box. What we're looking at is native M, but it is seamlessly integrated. Once again, if we look at how adventures are categorized, we can see that it is pretty well organized. And if we look at a single adventure, we see other M components like the M YouTube to make the user experience better. So this theme is fast, right? Super fast. It's actually secure and seamlessly integrating. And it is pretty engaging, which makes it perfectly aligned with the 4 pillars of a delightful user experience. And what about the content creation side of it? What about the content creation experience that we spoke about earlier on? Well, let's look at how Gutenberg can be used to rebuild a different version of the homepage. What we have to do is give the page a title, and then we'll have access to a set of blocks, for instance, custom blocks. By clicking on the little plus button, it will open a drop-down with a set of blocks. And what we want to do, for example, to rebuild our homepage is just click on the hero block. And as we can see, what we see immediately is that it resembles the front end, and we have access to really cool things like inline editing to change the text. This is new in WordPress, and it's pretty amazing. Let's continue building our page and add a discover block from the latest 3 suggested block, which is the most used. Right there, we have our second block on the page, and we can continue editing our page, for example, by changing the subtitle. And let's add one more third block, the featured destination block. Once again, as we can see, it pulls the content automatically. And if we were to reorder these blocks to change the look and feel of the page, we could just go ahead and click on the little icon on the left-hand side. And boom, our block has moved up and is now under the hero block. This is a pretty amazing editing experience, from my perspective at least. Let's preview what we just built in 30 seconds. A different version of the homepage, native M, with access of the amazing M components and an amazing content creation experience powered by Gutenberg. So where are we at today? The 0.7 plugin version of the plugin was released last week. And 0.7 is really the first step towards native AMP. It is more orientated towards power users to build themes from scratch. On the other hand, we have the AMP plugin 1.0, which is still in progress. And that will include the validation workflow we looked at today, the CSS Tree Shaking, the core Gutenberg blocks made AMP compatible, and a range of custom Gutenberg blocks which integrates the AMP components. What we have today is amazing, but the future is also very, very bright. And for that, I would like to invite Alberto back on stage to tell you more about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Oh my God, that's so exciting. I feel that I never saw it before, but it's awesome. So we have certainly gone a long way on our quest to achieve progressive WordPress, but we are not where we want to be. There is quite a bit of work that we have to do, and we are pursuing significant efforts in 3 main areas. One is enabling the app shell navigation model in WordPress. You may have heard of it as the app shell architecture, which is an architectural pattern to build sites in a way that if pages have static sections that do not change across navigation, we could cache them easily so that when you navigate a page, they can be loaded very quickly and provide a very nice onwards experience for the user. And the part of the pages that are changing that can be then rendered dynamically either on the client or on the server. And what I excited the most about this work is that it includes the incorporation of the Service Workers API into the WordPress core platform. I'm very excited about this particular area. Another area has to do with, remember our progressive web development model, we need tooling to help developers to do complex things in an easy way. And one of those areas is tooling to facilitate the development of WordPress themes, progressive WordPress themes. I'm going to say a few more words about this in a second. And the last part, which is like an Uber area, has to do with ecosystem adoption, right? Because, as you saw, WordPress has a vibrant ecosystem of thousands of plugins, thousands of themes, and we want to and need to work with the WordPress community to push WordPress towards the progressive road. There are many projects that are here, and stay tuned for them. Now, our friends at LinkedIn Learning have been working very, very hard developing a progressive theme boilerplate. Essentially, it is a theme development starter kit that allows or makes it easier for WordPress theme developers to go from 0 to a full progressive theme very quickly. So the boilerplate comes loaded with modern development workflow. It's highly configurable. It uses tools like Composer and Gulp, Browser Sync. It comes with a range of coding and performance best practices baked in, so that, for example, asynchronous loading of resources is by default. Lazy loading of images is by default. Okay? And it has an on-theme plugin integration, so that if the theme developer decides to have an uncompatible theme, he can switch a flag, and voila, you're going to get an uncompatible starter theme from the get-go. So the main developer of this project, which is Morten Rand Hendriksen, who is also a staff instructor at LinkedIn Learning, is preparing an awesome course that is going to teach you everything about how to use this boilerplate. And that particular course is going to be free, so don't miss out. Okay? Another things, if you can take 3 things from this talk, are the following. Success in the web is all about user experiences, building delightful user experiences. To do that, we need to strive to close the capabilities usage gap. It should be easy to do the right thing in the web. And the topic of today, it is possible today for WordPress developers to get native AMP experiences without sacrificing the fidelity of their site, of the content, or the flexibility of the WordPress platform. Remember those 3 things. And if you are a WordPress expert, you like to code quite a bit, and you are passionate about making the WordPress ecosystem better and the web better as a whole, you may consider working with us exactly on doing that. And with that, I want to thank you. There are some useful resources here, and I want to extend special thanks to Weston Router, the whole XWP team, and Automatic for all the awesome contributions to this work, and I'm very looking forward to what we're going to achieve in the coming months. Thank you very much.